Hello, my name's AJ Goldsby. I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida, and I'm coming today to bring you another one in my series of videos. And this is on the series of games that I've been doing. It's the 10 greatest chess games ever played. Now, I did this whole set of games many years back. I started on this project literally about over 20 years ago, and I finished it up probably sometime in the around 2005, 2006, somewhere in that area. But and I have many web pages. All of these games I have a web page on, and you can find these very quickly. But I just wanted to continue on. Of course, YouTube wasn't out when I first started doing my web pages. There was no YouTube or anything like that. So basically, what I've done is begun recently, with the last couple of years, is a series of videos on the 10 greatest chess games ever played. And like I said, I already have web pages on these games. So I want to go ahead and start looking at a game. This is, I consider this about the 6th or 7th most beautiful game of chess ever played. Just very quickly, I'll just tell you what that's my web page right there. It's that's a slice of my web page. It's www.ajschess.com/LifeMasterAJ /CAPAB hyphen MARS .html. I believe that's the whole web address, and you can find it pretty quickly with Google or with any other main search engine. But anyway, and like I said, my main website where you would find all this, and on the very first page, if you scroll down just a little bit, it's www.ajschess.com and then /LifeMasterAJ. And on that page, you can find the link to my 10 best games. And if you scroll down, there's a box there, and it says here I've completed my work on my 10 best games. And then there's a direct link to the beginning where I begin to describe these games. This game in itself is like I said, it's easily considered. Many masters have said it's one of the most beautiful games of chess ever played. Period. It was voted like one of the very best games in the first half of the 20th century by British chess magazines. Hundreds of writers and chess masters have lavished praise on it. It's in just about every book that I have on the Ruy Lopez and also on the Marshall Gambit. A really unique feature about this game is this was the very first Marshall Gambit. And Marshall and Capablanca were already known opponents back then. Marshall had been going to, I believe, Columbia University in New York, and from his native Cuba, and so he had been known by Capablanca, and him already knew each other quite well, and they played and they clashed, and this was in I believe it might have been the championship of the Marshall Chess Club or the Manhattan Chess Club, but anyway, this was a big tournament. It was a double round robin. Capablanca was in very fine form. He only gave up a handful of draws, and there were many good players that played in it, many strong masters. Marshall played in this, and like I said, Capablanca only even gave up only 3 or 4 draws in a double round robin tournament. And for complete details of this game, you can see both Marshall's book on his life and games, and also My Chess Career by Capablanca. He covers this quite well. Chernev calls this, of course, one of the most beautiful games ever played. Soltis, in his book, The 100 Best, ranks this as the 3rd best game ever played, period. And, I think he ranks it ahead of all but one Postal game. So, to me, that's extremely high praise. Nunn calls it an extraordinarily beautiful and exceptional chess game. And he says goes on to say that the story behind this game makes it one of the most famous games in chess history. And I could go on and on and on, but basically what I think I'm going to do is we're just going to go ahead and jump into the game and begin looking at the game itself. And like I said, when I finished the video, in the little box, there's just a box there just below where the video on YouTube says show more. If you'll click on that, I will put the link to my webpage. And of course you can read, pretty much, and go over all the variations there yourself. But we're going to go ahead and get into the game now. And like I said, this was actually Marshall's and Capablanca's first meeting in several years. I believe that Capablanca had been occupied going to university for at least 2 or 3 years. Should have been rusty. This game was played in the very first round. And so you would have thought that normal people, if they hadn't played hardly any serious chess in 2 years, then they might be slightly rusty. But not Capablanca. He was one of the greatest geniuses, in my opinion, to ever play the game. Right, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Already we have the first surprise. At this time, basically, Marshall's allowing Arai Lopez for the first time in almost a decade. His favorite defense was the Petrov defense, and he used that many times and won a lot of fine games with that. Bishop b5, a6. Of course, this is the Morphy defense. Bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3. Now with d6 and castles kingside, that's the main line of the closed variation. The closed variation was black plays 5, bishop e7 on move 5, and that's what marks the closed variation. If black captures the king pawn on move 5, then we get into the open variation. But this is the closed variation of the Arai Lopez, very standard line. And now black plays something new. He castles. Of course, Capablanca said, of course, this was his second surprise, wrote Capablanca. And basically now what has happened is Marshall's going for his a line that he'd been researching for a number of years, and he's going to play the very first time he's going to play the Marshall Gambit. Capab continues with the normal book move, which is c3. This is the normal move in the Arai Lopez. The main idea is, there's many ideas actually to this move. It's like a multi-purpose move. C3 guards these two squares, b4 and d4. Gives this bishop a hidey square here so that the knight can't win it after d6 and knight a5. The bishop's not exchanged off for a knight. But most importantly, it prepares the d4 square. And a lot of times what happens is white gains just a little bit of space. He plays d4, he dominates the center, and eventually that translates into a kingside attack. That's one of the very basic ideas of the Arai Lopez itself. And of course, if you ever studied Arai Lopez or seen any master level games, you would know that's a very common theme in the Arai Lopez, or what a lot of people also call the Spanish game. And now, of course, Marshall plays his very first time the Marshall attack or the Marshall Gambit. Boris Spassky was one of the first big name players, in my opinion, to really use this line consistently. In fact, he pretty much offered it, a lot of, he played it in big master level games, and he wasn't afraid to use it. And I think it was because of really Spassky's use of this in the 50s and especially in the 60s. Of course, Spassky played Petrosian 2 World Championships in 63 and 66, winning the World Championship in 1966. No, I'm sorry, rather, they played in 1966 and 69 because Bobby Fischer played Boris Spassky in 1972. So Petrosian played Spassky in 66 and 69. But anyway, Spassky used the Marshall attack, quite a bit, and he was the first big name player to use it consistently. And in my opinion, he legitimized this whole opening. And today, you'll see the Marshall attack being used. In fact, I thought it was very telling for me when I began a detailed study of this opening some years ago that Kasparov, or Garry Kasparov, correct name, I believe you say Kasparov, he never even allowed, most of the time his move order, he would always not even allow the Marshall. He would not play the c3 move. In other words, when black played castles, he would either play d3 or a4 or h3, and basically that's called the Marshall Gambit decline. In other words, you try to avoid the Marshall Gambit completely. And Kasparov himself, he used the Marshall Gambit a few times, but he never even allowed it as white, and I found that very telling. Anyway, black plays d5, and we have e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes e5, and then rook takes e5. And now here, this is a very key position for theory. Marshall's original idea was to retransfer his knight over to the king side and use that for attack. Today it's considered a little passé. I mean, it's not terrible, and it'd be a nice surprisal weapon if you're trying to learn a line that maybe your opponent may not be familiar with. But the main line here, I'll just very quickly show you the main line. The main line by theory today is c6, d4, bishop d6 attacking the rook, rook e1, queen h4, g3, queen h3 on move 14, 15 bishop e3, bishop g4, queen d3, and now black has both this move, RAE8, and or also f5 is very strong. I've seen Anand or Viswanathan Anand, he has used that, the Indian fellow who's currently the world champion, he's used that line f5 in a number of games. And it's a very complicated line, and I think you have to be very well prepared. But black gets a tremendous attack, and he has very good compensation for his pawn. But in the original game, Marshall did not play that line. That was discovered later by Soviet analysis. Marshall's original idea was to play knight f6, and basically, the idea is basically this king is very simple. White's somewhat backward in his development. Black has lots of open lines, and Black's pieces can very quickly get over kingside and get after the white king. And if White isn't careful, he can find himself attacked very quickly. And also, too, a lot of times the rook on e5, it can be attacked by bishop d6 and knight g4. So the rook on e5, in a way, is just a target right now. Black plays rook e1. That's the older move, but it must be okay because Capablanca played it. Bishop d6, h3. And it says already White begins to defend here. And, of course, you have to. If not, then you can lose quite quickly. Knight g4. And Capablanca's own comment here was the onslaught begins. And Soltis, fine and none, I'll give that move an exclam there. In fact, this is a game that's just literally littered with exclamation points. But queen f3, nice little move there. Queen h4. After knight g4, there's some pretty tactics here. I think I'll show you just the main line. We don't want to explore all the variations because that would take all day. But just quickly show you how White can lose after h takes g4. Queen h4, g3. These are all computer moves and book analysis. Bishop takes g3, f takes g3. Queen takes g3, check. King h1, bishop takes g4. And that's Capablanca's line. I mean, that line originated with Capablanca and says, and Black, wins here. And, of course, he saw that over the board. A lot of people don't realize what a wonderful tactician Capa was. So after the move, h3 and then knight g4, that knight's off limits, so White just plays queen f3. And the amazing thing, exclam, and the amazing thing to me is how Capablanca unerringly always found the best defense almost every move. Queen h4, exclam, Black continues with the most aggressive move there. d4, and a lot of writers, Capablanca, Soltis, fine, none, etc., they all give that move an exclam. I mean, it's just amazing. It says intuitive and absolutely correct, said Reuben Fine, even though it does allow a strong attack. Knight takes f2. Okay, it says the trapper is trapped, and basically Capablanca's white and Marshall's black, and of course Marshall must pursue his attack as vigorously as possible. Rook e2. That's again very good defense. Of course, just taking the knight queen takes f2 is answered by bishop to g3, and then he can get checkmated there if he's not real careful. So you have to be very careful of that. But anyway, rook e2. And now we have bishop to g4. It says the best way to continue the attack. Knight takes h3 check, does not yield as much. H takes g4. Bishop h2 check. King f1. Bishop g3. Now we have mating attacks already. White's being threatened with mate. And rook takes f2. At this point, that's already forced. Check. King e2. Bishop takes. Bishop to d2. This was I think that might have been an exclam there. There's a lot of ways for White to go wrong, but bishop to d2. White avoids a lot of silliness and basically stabilizes his position. Soltis does give that move an exclam. It says from this point on, Black's pressure grows steadily less. That's what Tartakower and Dumont say in the excellent book 500 Master Level Games of Chess. So we've had just all-out tactical clash, and basically what I'm trying to do now here is just give an overview of this game and maybe provide some color commentary and some history on the game. I have a web page where it covers the game in great detail, and a lot of the side variations are there if you wish to explore them. Bishop h4, queen h3, very complicated game. Rook e1 check, king d3, queen f1 check, king c2, and now basically the king has found safety. Bishop f2, again more tough stuff here. Queen f3. Both Floor and Soltis gives that a full exclamation point there. I mean, this game is just literally littered with exclamation points. It's almost useless to bother counting, all the moves that have exclams. I mean, practically just about every other move, and many times, you have long series of moves where both sides are given an exclamation point, and it's not just Soltis. I mean, this is, Floor and Nunn and Chernev, and I could just go on and on and on. Just an amazing game of chess. Queen g1, Black's again, trying to crank up the pressure and maintaining that pin. One of the things, obviously, is that White has this pin on the first row, and if the queen leaves the first row, then the knight's allowed to develop. So that's one of the reasons Black is maintaining this pin on the first row. Queen G1, bishop to D5, C5, D takes C, bishop takes C, B4, bishop E3, A4. And now, basically, White's kind of engineered the defense. He's, if nothing else, he can just free his rook with, or he can play King B2 and then move the knight, and his rook has found freedom finally after being trapped there in the corner for a long time. A5, of course, count on Marshall to try to find a swindle or try to complicate. A takes B5, A takes B4, rook A6. Now White goes on the offensive, takes. Knight takes C3. And now what's happened after many moves of defense is that basically White's got 3 pawns versus 3 pawns. Black has a rook, but White has 2 minor pieces. And finally, White's, after 20 moves of defense, White's finally got his pieces into play. Bishop B4, B6, and now White has rather a very, very nice pass pawn. Bishop takes C3, bishop takes C3. H6, Black's got to avoid any back rank, silliness here. For example, if Black played this move here, rook E3, then White has a very nice little combination here. Queen takes pawn on F7 check, ba-bang. And of course, when rook takes, rook A8 check, and it's that standard back rank mate problem. And of course, Marshall was much too good of a player. He was the guy that set traps, and he didn't fall into too many himself. B7, rook E3. Bishop takes F7 check, and there Black resigns. At this point, if rook takes, you can just promote the pawn and then win the rook too. So it's just a great game of chess. I tried to keep the video short on purpose, just run through the game itself. I wanted to talk about the game and the history. The analysis of the game, again, if you wanted to go through the analysis of the game and do a detailed analysis, I think I've already done that. I mean, I'm sure I've already done that. I have a web page for that, and you can explore that at your own leisure. I just wanted to provide a video and show this game, show off this game, and talk about what a great game it was. I mean, you can literally do as I did. I mean, one time when I was annotating this game, I literally spent 3 years studying this game with the computers and many books, and going over each game and subjecting it to basically a microscope and analyzing it with the chess engines. Unfortunately for me, when I first started, the engines were much weaker than they are today. Today they have the engines are much stronger. And I've been through this game recently with Fritz 12 and Fritz 13 and really found not too much news. So basically that concludes my video. Again, I was just trying to provide, some commentary on this game and show you a really wonderful game of chess, maybe one of the greatest games in the history of chess. And it's just a fantastic game. And I wanted a video to go along and complement my webpage. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you will analyze this game. If I've even sparked your interest just a little bit, that you'll take an hour or two one afternoon, and if you're a serious student of the game, study this game in detail. Break out a book or whatever you want to. Maybe find the volume My Chess Career. You might have that at your local library. And explore this game in detail and take a look at this game, because it's a wonderful game of chess. It's too many authors besides myself. Nunn, Soltis, Fine. I mean, the list is literally almost endless. Have cited this as one of the greatest games of chess ever played. And it's just an amazing game of chess. I mean, and also too, there's a tremendous amount of history to this game. It was the very first ever Marshall Gambit. It was Capablanca's meeting with Marshall, first serious meeting in several years. They hadn't played in a few years because, again, Capablanca, I believe, had been occupied going to university. He hadn't played in any serious chess in a couple of years, at least 2 or 3 or 4 years, because he was going to college. He was going to the University of Columbia there in New York. And so there's a lot of details behind this game and stories behind the stories. It's a very historic game. It's a tremendous game of chess. I've analyzed it with the computers. I've never really punched any holes in the actual game itself. It was just a tremendous high-level fighting game of chess. I think both players were at their finest. I mean, Capablanca and Marshall, when they played this game, both players were easily in the top 10. In fact, they might have both been in the top 5 at the time that this game was played, which was 1918. And anyway, that concludes my coverage of this game. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope that if this will inspire you to go on and study this, both players. Capablanca was one of the greatest players that ever lived. Marshall was also a very fine grandmaster. I think, not a lot of people realize what a great player Marshall really, really was. In fact, I got an email just recently from my friend Jim Russell. He's a many time champion of the state of Louisiana. He's a 2300, very strong player. But anyway, he sent me an email and he talked about one of Marshall's games, and he commented, he said, it was really surprising to him to see what a great in-game player that Frank Marshall really was. And so, hopefully, if this video has pleased you, and if it's got you interested in the games of both Capablanca and Marshall, then I have done my job. And also, I hope you'll check out my webpage. If you enjoy my videos and you like my web pages, then I would ask you would consider making a donation. Just go to www.paypal.com and then make a donation under my email address, which is LifeMasterAJ@yahoo.com, just spelled exactly the way it sounds, and it's all over my website, so you should have no trouble finding it. Thank you for watching my video, and have a great day.